Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Rielle the Everwise, a Voltron deck that has a lot of graveyard and discard synergies. I don't know if I'd want to call this Rielle discard, but this version is very much a Voltron deck where we have a main goal with our commander as our main creature. This is one of our donation decks of the week. This deck comes from longtime friend of the channel, Jesse. Thank you so much for sending this deck, Jesse. I think this deck is great. I really do like it. There's a few directions I want to pick at it, but overall, I think this is very, very well built. With a commander like this, I find that it's very, very easy to kind of like hone in on the strategy that you want and build towards it. And I think this deck has done a really good job doing that. So with that in mind, let's get right to it. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Rielle the Everwise, and why are they our discard Voltron commander? Rielle is 3 mana in blue-red and is it commander, human wizard, 0/3, and she has 2 abilities. The first ability is that she grows for each instant or sorcery card in the graveyard. And then secondary, whenever you discard 1 or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. I find both halves of Rielle to be very, very strong. 3 mana commander is great, allowing you to pull her out real quick, and I really do like, I've seen a lot of games where she's very easily 21 or higher just by herself, which is of course makes her a one-shot commander. But to be fair, most of the time early game she's attacking for 7 or 8, which is still a 3-turn clock, which I really do like. But that second ability, whenever you discard 1 or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards, is really powerful. It represents such a large amount of card draw, and I think I want to pick at this a little more and get a few more cards in that direction, because I think it's very strong, and I feel like we could be utilizing it more. So let's get right into it. Looking at the deck, there's a lot I like already. Our mana cost is generally low, and we kind of curve up to 5 with Blasphemous Act at 9, so we're not going too high. That being said, we only have 32 lands, and we do have 5 drops we actually want to be casting fairly, and some of those cards I'm going to be a little picky at. So let's start with the lands. I get this idea, and you might too if you look through this deck. You can see we've got Considers, we've got Thought Scours, we've got Ponders, Preordains, and a lot of looting. So one would assume that we can go a bit lower on lands to make up for that. And I do generally agree. I will say I wouldn't mind us going just a bit higher. I think we could easily get 34, 35 without the deck suffering from too much of mana bloat. And even with that in mind, you know, we can always discard the lands that we draw, to which I'm going to suggest some cards to do so. But generally, I think we're just a little low mana. To me, the current setup of the deck is that it's very strong, but I want to be generating mana and getting ahead on cards while we are doing our game plan. So with that in mind, I want to look at some of the 5 mana cards that are 4 and 5 mana cards in the deck and see which ones kind of stick out. Because honestly, at the 1 and 2 mana cards, I'm almost universally happy with them. Even the 3 mana creatures, all of which are either wheels, mana reducers, payoffs, or straight up copies of Rielle so we stay in the game, all those cards are great. Let's look instead at our higher curve, because a lot of these cards are good, but very few of them win us the game or have the power level that I would like in a deck that's so few lands. You know, we're working so hard to get to that 5 mana. We need that really good payoff. Let's take a look. Starting off with Melek, Reforge, Researcher. So this is new from the newest set. Very cheap for being a mythic. I like already that this card just works with our commander very well, has the same ability, except for it's twice as powerful, and then this bonus ability is very good. I have no problems with this card, this is great. Psychosis Crawler is interesting. I think Psychosis Crawler is close to being cut for me. The one thing I think I would like with this card is if we had more rituals or fast mana or the ability to generate mana, I would like Psychosis Crawler a lot more, because one of the benefits of it being an artifact is that if we use, like, I don't know, what is the 3 mana create 5 mana? It's banned in Modern. Dragon something, I thought. But I could be wrong. Any of these rituals that generate like 5+ red mana, there's a lot. This can come out with just that red mana, and I really, really do like that. I think that is the main draw of it to me, and then you just wheel a few times and you're dealing tremendous damage to your opponents. However, if we are not going this combo route, I don't like it as much. Oftentimes, this is a very, very fair card that just kind of hangs around, you know, is generally 5 to 6, a 5/5 or 6/6, and deals a decent amount of damage. But considering that our commander almost always one-shots players in the late game, I don't know if we're going to be able to do enough damage. So this spreads out our damage. I guess this is what I'm getting at. This spreads out our damage and gives us a very low damage to card draw ratio. But if we combo off, it's very strong. If we're attacking fairly, or I say fairly, if we're attacking with Rielle and the Drakes being 7/7s and stronger, we're going to try to like target down players one at a time, and this thing spreading of the damage doesn't really help that game plan. So to me, this is one of the weaker 5 mana cards, so to me, I'd like to cut it, but I'll leave that up to Jesse. Salvager of Secrets, I think definitely needs to go. We are already playing both 4 mana variants. We are playing both the Archaeomancer and the Ardent Elementalist, both of which are cards I really do like. However, I think the third one here at 5 mana is really pushing it. This is going to take an entire turn to get a card back, and then with the land base we have, we're just not going to be able to cast it. You know, the card, especially if it's a card that's worth bringing back. Like, we're not bringing back, you know, obviously not Artful Dodge or Flashback, but not Careful Study, not Ponder, Preordain. We're bringing back, you know, our wheels, our stronger cards, our Prismari commands, our well, not even Season Date, but our chain reactions, right? These are the cards we're going to bring back. So with that in mind, 5 mana to bring one of those back, I really don't like that. I find that to be just a little too high. Looking at our sorceries, Devastation Tide just feels a little excessive. Now, I get the idea that we can use this to bounce all permanents, and that's really, really strong when we are playing only one main permanent. Still, I don't know if I like this. It feels like the miracle cost is too finicky. The 5 mana reset the board isn't that great. You know, I'd rather this be Evacuation, which we are playing. We are playing. So to me, this Devastation Tide just feels kind of okay. You know what I might actually like instead is the 3 mana bounce all non-land, non-creature permanents that came out in Aftermath. It keeps the boards around, which is probably why you're playing this as a bounce all creatures. But between Blasphemous Act, between Chain Reaction, and Evacuation, I think we have enough board clears. So if we're using this more as a non-creature board clear, I would like it to be the 3 mana one. And if that's not what you're using it for, I don't think we should be playing this at all. Right? Like in the situations where we just need that hit to go through, I think we'd be better off, you know, just casting our Whisper Silk Cloak or another, you know, unblockability artifact rather than this one card, because we lose our commander anyways when we do this, and I don't really like it. Pour Over the Pages is close. I recognize it does a lot of things. Draw 3, untap 2, discard a card. Now, if this was like, the thing is, I wish it actually, and I know this is weird, I wish it discarded more cards, because that would be stronger with Rielle. Are we playing, Frantic Search, for example, is much, much stronger than this, because it allows you, because of the discard 2, and obviously untaps less and costs less, and instant speed. At 5 mana, I really don't like this. What we could do is get a version of this card at 4 mana or 3 mana, where it's just like even on discard and draw and maybe instant speed, and I wouldn't dislike this. But this just feels like at sorcery speed, it's too clunky. It does a lot of kind of neat things, and you're kind of happy with the results because of the untap, because most likely you'll be able to do something after. However, even then, it just feels like it feels a lot of work. I would really rather just the 4 mana draw 3 to concentrate, I think. I think that would just be a lot more consistent and you'd be happier with it. So to me, this is just a very, very clunky card. Temporal Manipulation is great as a one-of. This is a very strong card, and in certain turns, it's going to be very, very powerful. However, in other turns, this isn't going to do much. I think this is fine. I'm not going to be too hard on it, but I will say that these cards get a lot better the more permanents you have, because they all represent, this card represents an additional attack phase. And when we're just playing one real creature most of the time, this represents just one additional attack. And though that's really powerful in a Voltron deck where we're going to take out our opponents in one hit, it is still worth noting that we are using this card a little weaker than intended. It almost makes me want to find a way to give Rielle Vigilance and instead play, is it Seize the Spoils? The, I could be wrong, let's see. Seize the Spoil is the other card I would like to suggest. It is the take another turn at 3 mana. No. Back. Extra turn. Savor the Moment. Very close text in my mind. So I really, really like this flavor. But if we could instead use this to kind of with Vigilance on our commander through some equipment or something, I think I would like that better. If the main goal is to use this to get another attack from our commander. That being said, once you have, you know, a lot of permanence and a lot of mana, being able to cast Temporal Manipulation and take another turn is really strong. But we just don't have that many permanents, and we don't have enough lands that I feel like we can really maximize on the extra turn. So I like this. Keep this in. Think about it though. Think about it a little bit. See if this is really what you want, because it's flashy, and I just think it's underused a little bit in our deck. Looking at our last two 5-mana spells, Evacuation and Sunder are both really, really strong here. Evacuation, obviously, when you have one commander, like one creature really, evacuating the board is a really, really good move, especially on your opponent's last opponent's end step. Then you can throw out your commander, hopefully give them haste and take an attack in. Sunder is just really strong. Jesse's told me he doesn't want to take Sunder out, which I do. Honestly, I feel like maybe that's a reputation that people have about bounce land or like removing land destruction, but I think Sunder is very, very good in these kind of decks. I think Sunder is exceedingly strong in decks where, one, you have a commander that can really pressure your opponents out of the game, and two, you have wheels, right? This is better than destroying all lands in a lot of situations because you can bounce them and it's more accessible to just wheel those lands away. Yes, your opponents draw a bunch of cards, but at the same time, it does create a situation where perhaps this is better with Wheel of Fortune, but for your opponents, it's just better that, you know, that they lose all of their lands and they'll have to start playing one land a turn. I think that'll be enough to kind of lock the game in, and I think that's the biggest thing people don't like, is if you blow up all the lands and you cannot win the game. I think they don't like that, but if you Sunder Wheel with a creature out, like Rielle, I think you're generally okay to say, yeah, I'm going to win the game, and your opponents can decide whether they want to stay in the game or not. So, those are 5-mana cards. I do really want to quickly look through the 4-mana cards. I think Kinetic Augur is starting to get close. No, this one is very good, actually. Hold on, what's the... I guess it's just another strong version. I guess the previous version of the deck I've seen had more of the 3-mana ones. Yeah, and here we're picking the best of. Okay, so Kinetic Augur is a very good one. Chain Reaction is very strong. Seize the Day is great. Aetherize is great. Factor Fiction and Fireless. Okay, these are all good. So I think the 5-mana cards are generally the ones I want to pick at. I want to see if there's anything else that particularly catches my eye before I go into additions, because I do have quite a few additions, and I haven't asked to take too many out. Looking here... yeah. I think these are generally good. think Gutter Snipe is the closest one, which is a card I really do like, but I just don't know how many cards we are casting a turn in order to make the most out of Gutter Snipe. So it does stand out to me as being not the best shell for it, and I think it's the same thing to me as Psychosis Crawler. Both of these cards are very, very strong in kind of a combo-oriented deck, but when we're building towards, a Voltron, I haven't really said, Voltron is when you build a deck with one commander in mind and go for those attacks. Probably should have said that earlier, but I think these strategies of spreading damage are less attractive when we go into that Voltron strategy. And you might be saying, but Cursed, isn't it good to kind of diversify, our threats and our ideas when we're going all in, or like when we're building a deck? And I do agree with that, but the way this deck diversifies its threats is by having a bunch of creatures that does what the commander does, right? Because we are Voltron. We are leaning on our commander very much so. And so our best solution is to play more copies of our commander instead of finding a completely separate strategy to kind of tune into. So I like Gutter Snipe, but I think that could be one removed. All right, let's look at additions here. So some of these are going to be a little boring, and I think there's not many. I think there's 2 boring, but I think they're worth considering. Strike It Rich, we're going to come back to this, but I do really think I would like some more treasures in this deck. I would like the ability to generate more mana, and I would like that coming from instants and sorceries primarily, so that it can fuel our commander and generally fuel our plan. Strike It Rich is, of course, very, very strong because it allows you to go from 1 mana to 3. So if this is in your opening hand, you have a turn 2 Rielle, which is really, really strong. And the fact that as a flashback card, you don't particularly mind just discarding it. That being said, 3 mana to flashback this to create a treasure isn't particularly attractive. However, it is an option if you ever feel like you have nothing else to do, you can create some mana and move on. It's something. I think its front half, I say front half, I think its first cast is strong enough that I would definitely put it in. Still About the Back is our other somewhat boring card. I think it's just a good protection card against your commander. It's very good. Like, we have counter magic, but I like the idea of sometimes allowing board clears to happen. Slip Out the Back, and if you want a second copy, I think there's the Blue March from Neon Dynasty that does the same thing, where you can easily pay to phase out 1 creature. I think those I would play next, because there's a lot of situations that if someone board wipes and you have Rielle out, I think you're okay with that, right? If you can phase out Rielle and let the board wipe resolve, you're in a really, really good situation, because by the time you untap, most players will not have a ton of creatures, and Rielle is very, very dangerous in those situations. So with that in mind, I wouldn't mind some more phasing, and I think this is the best way. I also think +1/+1 counters are nice on Rielle, because Rielle does not gain toughness, so putting her up to 4 toughness puts her out of bolt range, which I think is rather nice. The next one is a card from the newest set that I do think is kind of fun. I don't know to what degree I love it, but I think it bears testing. I cannot pronounce that. Prop's Memory enters the battlefield, it replaces itself, you have no maximum hand size, which isn't bad with certain cards in the deck, but generally, I just really like the fact that every combat, if you can especially get that discard off, like the loot before combat, and with Rielle, you're going to draw a bunch of cards, and then you're going to put basically all the extra draws worth of cards. Those are going to be +1/+1 counters on Rielle. Once again, +1/+1 counters are great. They allow her to stick around, survive certain removal, and just deal with blockers. And so I really do like it at 2 mana and the ability to cycle itself, basically. I think that's good enough. I will also say, doesn't that work? Yeah, so Props, still not going to say the name. This card, if you have your commander out on ETB, will draw a card to at least put a +1/+1 counter on it by combat. I didn't realize that, and I do particularly like that. So I really do like this, and at 50 cents, I think this is a very, very easy inclusion. Another newer card, which is slightly not at 50 cents, is Inti. Inti's a card I continue to be very, very impressed with. Everywhere I see them, like in Modern, a lot in Modern, but in Commander and in a deck like this card is very, very strong. It does so much, right? Not only does it allow us to have a discard outlet on attack and put trample on Rielle, which is just very, very powerful. Once again, gives that counter to put her to 4 toughness, but it also allows us to start, not only are we discarding, when we're discarding cards, we're exiling and get some pseudo card draw, which if we're doing on our opponent's turns, it's good. We're going to lose some of these because I think we draw discard a lot and we're kind of low on mana, but I think overall it's very much so worth doing. I think Inti will create a huge power spike. Being a low mana creature and giving our commander trample is going to be a very, very good combination. Another newish card that kind of caught my eye, I'm not too sure to what degree I really like it, but I wanted to suggest it anyways. This is a card that really caught my eye as a 2 mana, as a kind of like, oh, what are they called? The Bedlam Reveler. The card I used to play in Modern that I really like, and this is definitely a better Bedlam Reveler, especially in a deck like this, with the Stoke Genius being the loot that you like, but not going to the graveyard, which is notable, and then being able to cast easy to cast later in the game. It is just a 4 or 5, doesn't really work with our strategy that much, but I think we're generally playing it for the Stoke Genius with this half as a bonus. I don't know if I'm really going to recommend it, but I saw it and I wanted to talk about it because this is a card I really liked. If you were going less Voltron, I think this card gets a lot better, but in the Voltron build, I'm kind of fitty-fitty on it. Collector's Vault, another card from that same set, is a card that catches my eye. Once again, this is a bit tough for me to easily suggest, especially when our mana doesn't feel as solid, but this is a very good card to get around flooding, to create treasure tokens, to trigger our looting. This just does a lot for what it's worth. I just don't know how often you're going to cast this and then never activate it. And that's going to be my biggest question. So I think it's definitely worth testing. I think it's a very powerful card, but it requires testing to see how it works. Another card to kind of deal with flooding is Tectonic Reformation. So this card gives all of your lands cycling red, so you can pay a red to just toss them away. And I like this. I like this because not only does it work with our draw and our discard synergies, I think it's just generally good, and the fact that you can cycle it away itself is very nice. The thing is, I find this works really, really well with Rielle's ability going off once each turn. So if you happen to have like a flooded hand and you just turn after turn, each player's turn, you're just going to cycle one land, so 1 red, discard this, draw 2, is phenomenal, right, with Rielle out. The only problem is neither this card nor the cycling it gives to lands will grow Rielle, so this leans very much so on her second ability, and I think that's still good enough, but it's worth considering. I think the opportunity cost, considering this card has cycling, is extremely low, and with that in mind, I do think it's worth playing, but I will leave that to you. One more from actually the same set that really caught my eye is Surly Badgersaur. I think this is very, very powerful. It says whenever you discard it, it basically is a discard payoff, but very, very much so, these are the parts that we want to care about. Whenever you discard a land card, create a treasure token, and whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land card, which is most of your cards, it'll fight something. So, growing this creature is tough. We could be using Inti or we could be using Prof's Memory to do so, but I think much more likely this creature is just going to be a 4 mana creature that's always a 3/3. And though that feels not great, honestly, I think, so this card reminds me a lot of, I can't remember what it's called. There's a 3 mana, it's like a devil, it's such a weird name, I really like it. It's like knocking over a bowl of cereal. I wish I were kidding. It is it's whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you go to creature. These cards do very different things, but it very much reminds me of a red creature that's a payoff for you just playing your deck. The ability to fight, you gotta think this, instead of it being a fight, is that it allows you to bolt a 2-power or smaller creature every turn. And I think that's good enough, right? This will clean up a lot of small creatures that are generally utility creatures. This will kill a lot of you know, Mana Dorks, I'm thinking Thalia, I'm thinking Dark Confidant, Esper Sentinel, any small utility creatures, this will kill on one discard, which I think is very much so worth it. Then, that's not even counting, you know, the times you're going to let Surly Badgersaur just die to kill someone's commander, right? You can play this out, even if there's no targets, and later, when you feel like it, you can use it to kill, like, trade with a commander, which I think is particularly strong. That's not even including that sometimes you will discard creatures, and when you do, it will grow. And the second this becomes like a 5/5 or 6/6, forget about it. This is an incredibly powerful card in your deck. So, it looks a little clunky, but I think it'll perform well. It needs testing, but I really do like it. I think the utility and reach this card gives you is quite good. All right, next we have a collection of these 3 cards. These 3 cards are some of my favorite red cards: Big Score, Unexpected Windfall, and Seize the Spoil. Now, I'm pretty sure there's a few others, at least 1 or 2 that do similar things, but I want to just disturb with these. And the whole idea, especially with Unexpected Windfall and Big Score, these are cards that discard a card, so allow with Rielle for you to, 1, fuel your graveyard and get an extra draw in, but they create treasure tokens. And I really do think the deck will benefit by just having a little extra mana here and there. These cards are just better, like they're just really, really strong, and they often pay back their cost with the treasure tokens, so it doesn't really hurt to have them at 4 mana. So I really, really like them, and I think they will be very useful to you and very powerful to kind of untap with 6 or 7 mana, especially because at instant speed, you don't need to commit to them until the last end step, and I do really like that. Seize the Spoiled is the weaker of the bunch, but I will say it is lower mana, so there is a benefit to it. Looking at a few cards that I think are, at least 2, that I think would be better finishers than something like Temporal Manipulation or stuff like that, there's 2 that come to mind. The first one is Path of the Pyromancer. Discard all the cards in your hand, get red for each card discarded that way, then draw that many cards +1. I think this is a phenomenal card, and if you can pick it up at like 16 cents, this is insane. The ability to just cast this, discard 7 cards, draw 14, get an incredible amount of red mana, and then do whatever you want the next for the rest of the turn. I really, really like that. Obviously, this is better at when you have a little more mana, so that you can get blue mana, like leave blue mana up so you can cast some of your blue spells. But I think it's really worth considering that with like our treasure generation, especially with the previous cards I'm going the wrong way. The previous cards that I just pointed out, these can turn the red mana you gain into blue mana. It's not Manamorphose because we can't actually play that, but it's close, right? You're spending this mana, you're getting some of it back in a different color, and you get to cast more spells. So I think this card is really, really good. There is a whole, what is this? Planeswalk. This is for Planes Chase. I think you can just ignore that, but once in a while, you'll play Planes Chase and you'll feel real smart for having this card. So I do particularly like this. I think it's a fantastic finisher in your deck and just represents like so much value. Because we always got to remember when you're using this card, you are also fueling your graveyard. So Rielle is growing in the meantime. So big, big fan. The other one I showed it accidentally before, but Chandra's Ignition, I think this is just a very, very strong finisher. So this one is interesting. I feel like I should address this. I didn't like, I don't like Gutter Snipe here. I don't like the Phyrexian 5 mana creature because they spread the damage around. So why do I like this? Well, I think straightforwardly, the damage you're spreading is just much higher with Rielle. I believe you're gonna get like, what? I think it's easy to set this up to do at least 10, 15 damage across the board in one attack. But the fact that it hits all your opponent's creatures is the main thing. Well, it's actually all creatures, right? But you don't care because you really play one creature. So casting this wipes the board and sets all of your opponent's life totals to vulnerable, into that red zone where Rielle can set up a lethal attack. This is just, if you can get Rielle to upwards of 15 power or to 20, 25 power, then this is probably going to finish off 1 or 2 opponents and then you attack the last one. So I think this is really good. I also think this is the kind of card that I want to keep putting back into my hand with cards like our Archaeomancer or Ardent Pyromancer, this is the card I want to cast more than once a game, right? So this is I think a really good finisher and payoff for the deck. So I would definitely grab this. It is about $5-6, but I think it's worth it quite a bit. Then one I definitely want to play, and I think this is the last card, is Burning Inquiry. I put this at the end because I'm sure there are some people who will hate you for playing this card. This card is mean. This card can be very, very mean. You cast this, and your opponents discard all the lands out of their hand. On turn 1, they're going to be very, very salty. However, I mean, I really like paying 1 mana to defeat an opponent, so I personally very much so like it. Obviously, this card is draw 3, discard 3, draw 3 off of Rielle, which is very, very powerful. But I think overall, this is just such a powerful card that it'd be a mistake not to play. The only reason I wouldn't play is that if my friends would stop talking to me if I played it. And that's it. Those are my suggestions and additions for the deck. Like I said before, I really do like the deck. It's really the mana I want to kind of pick at, and a few of the higher mana cards that I think just don't hold their weight enough. If there were other things I would go at, I think what is our division on color? Yeah, the 10-10 Island Mountains don't feel right. I feel like if this is the division that we're seeing, I think we could build it to be a little more on islands, but of course, that's going to depend on how the changes come through with the additions and the cards you take out. But I would like it, if we're going to lean in one direction, our basics should represent that, right? Instead of just being even, which I don't particularly like. Likewise, I will say if we stay at 60% blue, the Pyromancer card, Path of the Pyromancer, does get somewhat worse, not a lot worse when it's 60-40, but it's worth considering. I think this card is really, really good, and I would bend my deck a little bit to build towards this myself, but I'll leave that to you to decide. I hope this video was helpful to you and building this deck. Thank you so much, Jesse, for supporting the channel and setting the deck, and good luck. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there is a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you, and good luck in brewing and building.